So again, I really, really do appreciate you giving me your time, you being here with us, sharing the space with me. One as a foreigner, two as somebody again who's not necessarily not like I a faculty member or student here at the University of Pretoria. So I'm extremely grateful, honored, and privileged to be here. So I just wanted to get that out the way. So once again, I don't have the disadvantage I have is I'm not aware of time. I don't have either one of my phone. So I have to. I'm going to try to just play it by ear and use what we would say is the old system. You know, as we're not born with these machines, so I should be able to figure it out. I'm going to try not to move this HDMI cord too much. I think that's what's making it tune in and out. Apologies for that. So again, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Daquan Lawrence. I'm originally from Harlem, New York, Harlem, New York. I am currently a doctoral candidate at Howard University, which is located in Washington, D.C. And I am many things, but first and foremost, I consider myself a student of life and a father. I would say it's probably the second most important after that. I have a young daughter, Destiny, who's about to turn 7. But what brings me here, I would say a little bit about me. Originally grew up in New York, but my mom was an orphan. So I'm going to try to run through my life story really quickly before I jump in. But my mom was an orphan, and her name is Makeba. I say Makeba, some people may say Makeba, but she was named after Mariam Makeba, who was obviously a world-renowned freedom fighter and musician and phenomenal woman who loved her country. So for my mother to be named after Mariam Makeba, for her to also be an orphan, for her to grow up in social services, on welfare, for me to be a product of a teenage parent household in circumstances where, statistically speaking, we have so many negative stereotypes about teenage parents. My father also was involved in what we consider, a life of crime, right? So I'm not necessarily somebody speaking to you from a point of American privilege. I'm not somebody who comes from a trust fund. I have no corporate ties. I have nobody that paid for my education. I literally am a beneficiary of the welfare state, and me being somebody who utilized the welfare state to get to this point, I'm now here speaking to you as someone who rose from my own ashes or trenches, if you will. So I say that just to put that into perspective, because relatively speaking, I know where I'm at. I know the history somewhat of this country. So again, I don't think that my experience in urban poverty gives me any more reason or advantage on anybody. I just think that that's just my experience. That's what brings me here. So again, my mother was named after, like I said, a South African woman, and that's the reason and excuse I would like to use for my interest in this country. I also have what is considered a revolutionary school of thought, or I come from a revolutionary school of thought, and I like to say, politically speaking, the left is the middle to me. So whatever you think about American politics, before you ask or when you ask, just know that the lens that I'm going to give you is going to be the most radical lens that you can think of, because I'm a product of urban poverty in America, right? So again, I'm not coming from a position of status. That being said, the name of this presentation on my dissertation is Urban Class Structure of Post-Apartheid South Africa, Case Studies from Johannesburg to Botswana. I am a student at Howard University in the African Studies Department, which is Howard University was the first university in America to have an all-black university staff lead the field of African Studies that was founded in the 50s. So it's very, 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 very important for me to be here, and it's very, I take it very seriously again as a student of the diaspora and as a student of life. I would also like to thank the Center for African Studies, where my dissertation advisor works, where I serve as a student member and graduate student researcher. She was so kind to allow me to live stream this event so I could be able to showcase what I've been working on for the last 6 years. So thank you, Dr. Johnson. So quickly, I have a lot of information. Again, as we were all privy to the history of South Africa, to me, I don't like omitting things, because I think when you omit things, that it leaves out, or it changes the context. So I try to give a thorough estimation as, again, as a foreigner and as an outsider of historical events in South Africa that has led to what I would consider the status quo from, again, a foreigner standpoint, despite whatever commonalities I have with members of the African diaspora. So I'm going to go through the background statement of the problem, my methods, brief history, and then numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 are going to hopefully go a little bit quicker, and that's where I will get into the meat of my findings. So the background, the project investigates class structure in modern post-apartheid, specifically looking at members of the urban Black populations located in the Gauteng province or municipalities of Johannesburg and Pretoria. The core research questions, you can frame them two ways. The first question is, how does race continue to shape class and urban class constructions in South Africa? The second is, how is the middle class defined in urban South Africa? Notice that I've specifically, again, knowing that South Africa is a large country, many differences between the urban and rural areas, even amongst the urban populations and amongst the rural populations, many variations, many differences. So I had to be extremely specific and be attempting to be extremely specific. The areas that appealed to me the most were Soweto and Johannesburg and Sunnyside here in Pretoria. So for the last 6 years, I've been spending a considerable amount of time in Sunnyside, again, with my brother and my partner, Ali Muhammad, who has helped me create a community-based research model of a ground-up study that, although I have met with government officials, I have met with political parties, I have met with students, I have met with professors, I'm not leaning on their experience. The primary experience here are members of what we could say the labor class. Some people call them the working poor. I think these are misnomers, and these are things that I'm going to get into during this analysis of class. But again, me coming from humble beginnings, I believe I relate. And one thing is I'm kind of giving away some of my findings here, but I believe class is permeable. So even though they may say this is where the non-whites are supposed to go, this is where the whites are supposed to go, this is where the rich are supposed to go, this is where the poor are supposed to go, in reality, everybody's interdependent. In reality, if you want to use the Marxist treatment, the proletariat and bourgeoisie are inexplicably intertwined because, again, capital obviously depends on labor. What happens when capital does not have labor? Some say now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, we have machines, so we don't need people. The machines can do what people do. We'll see how far we get with that. Getting back to the background, so I use class analysis tools by African diaspora scholars, with scholars, W.E.B. Du Bois, an American, Bantu Steve Biko, a South African, Amilcar Cabral, a Guinean, Frantz Fanon, as well as Kwame Nkrumah and Walter Rodney. Again, so we have a wealth of perspectives from the African diaspora. To me, that is extremely important because I'm going to fuse and use their theories and notions of critiques of capitalism, classism, as I coalesce it with not only my findings, but the Marxist perspective. A lot of people, I think, limit themselves to Marxism. Even here, again, I know where I'm at in South Africa, where we think that we're criticizing capitalism just because we're using Marxist treatments. In my estimation, Marx wasn't talking about Africa. Marx was talking about Western Europe. That's a conversation for another day. But with that being the impetus, I would like to use African diaspora or ground-up critiques of the political economy instead of using Marx or leaning on Marx, or only, again, to me, it's lazy to just say, again, like, because of this communism, is this socialism, is this, it's more nuanced than that, especially because these things actually predated Europe, so it depends which text we're going to refer to, it depends which sources we're going to use, and that, and so on and so on. So again, as you can see, like I said, I have a very grounded and radical school of thought. The class conceptions of Western society are revised to allow application to 21st century urban South African conditions. And the study examines class and the social dimensions of inequality because, again, specifically speaking as an outsider, as an American, we can say that during the Apartheid administration, they created the homelands. We now have what became between 8 and 10 nationalities, whatever have you. But from, again, an American standpoint, some people would say, oh, well, what's the difference between different members of groups in South African society? I don't necessarily think that, again, there is much in common as people would say that we have. It's not to say that everybody's different and we should be individualized, we should fragment. However, the things that are the same are baseline, and the things that are distinct, again, are unique. So I don't think that, again, grouping everybody in the same class is productive as it can be. What I'm particularly studying here, or what I'm using to conceive of a new class analysis or new dimensions of class, would be one, occupation, English language proficiency, which again is particularly important here, even though we're in some would say in a developing country in the global south. Consistent access to the internet, a bank account, a scribe status, otherwise known as how the market views your employability, perceptions of blackness, which again is important in a society that is not only multiracial, but uses Western paradigms where we appropriate opportunities and services based on, again, what notions of Africanity you subscribe to. Some people are proud to be black, some people are not proud to be black. Some people believe that their power is measured by their proximity to whiteness. I don't. So again, because I don't, I could actually go into different rooms, and again, I could put that on the table so we could all dissect it and chop it up. And last but not least, we have education level, which is further delineated between formal education and informal education. Again, remember, I'm speaking to you as a product of a parent, or many of us come from households where our grandparents didn't go to college. Our grandparents may have been farmers. Our grandparents may have been working in other places and doing other things for work. But they instilled the importance and the values of education to us. I believe that's important to respect different institutions. Again, being in South Africa, I believe we think about the institution of women, grandmothers. These are institutions, they're institutions in and of themselves. So again, when I talk about education, I believe you can be formally educated. It's great, you have a piece of paper, some says it's manumission papers, you're now free, good job. You could also be informally educated. You also deserve respect because what you have to do between 9 and 5 or in 24 hours that you exist in one day is equal to what somebody's doing that goes to work for Coca-Cola or De Beers or the government. Just because you have more money in a bigger house and a bigger car doesn't make you more worthy. When we die, we all die. If you ride first class, when the plane goes down, I believe the first class passengers also go down with the plane. But maybe I'm mixing things up. Statement of the problem. So South Africa, I'm going to not read this word for word. South Africa has been widely discussed for its massive inequality. Earlier studies have explained the economic elements and divisions of inequality, while few researchers have called for awareness of the social dimensions of inequality in South Africa and the role class occupies in the new South Africa. What is less widely known is why some Africans in urban populations have varying lifespans, have varying lifestyles, have various recreational habits or preferences within their lifestyles. Recently, new patterns of stratification have emerged, creating the need for new assessments of implications of both race and class, which were highly correlated during the apartheid era. In post-apartheid South Africa, an assessment of class can produce findings about the distributions of various levels of poverty. Otherwise, what I would like to say is underdevelopment. I think poverty is another concept. Defined as economic underdevelopment for members of urban populations as well as other social factors. In a society plagued by economic inequality, rooted in policies of racial division, land distribution and redistribution, as well as social amalgamations and divergences among a heterogeneous population or citizenry, class analyses that account for such factors are very important. While factors that constitute class are usually related to economics, class analyses are arbitrary, and they can consider various methods. They can consider social, political, cultural, or economic status. It does not just have to be an economic treatment when someone says class. That said, skills such as language ability, the ability to manipulate technology, function via the internet, access a bank account are all equally important, as well as education level, occupation, or employment status. This is integral in modern South Africa for a minimum of 2 reasons. One, in our capitalist global economy, class divisions are not as structured as we think. It's not literally like there's a wall, right, or an invisible barrier, just like borders. We like to say that's this country is this country, this country is this country. This is Zambia, this is Zimbabwe, this is South Africa, this is Zimbabwe. But some places, as we know, a border may be a street. If you're on that side of the street, you're in one country. If you're on this side of the street, you're in another country, right? So we would like to say that there's a class distinction because there's a political line that's been drawn, right? Conceived by some people, maybe by the Berlin Conference, I don't know, or some derivation of that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't talk to my brother just because he goes to a private school and I don't happen to be formally educated. That my brother is still my brother, whether it's a blood brother or whether it's a distant relative. If we conceive or if we subscribe to these notions of inferiority and superiority, then we'll stop and we'll say, no, I'm not going to speak to you because you're from a different race. No, I'm not going to speak to you because you're from a different class. No, I'm not going to speak to you because of your sexuality. No, I'm not going to speak to you because of how much money you make. What's the difference? I don't know. You tell me. So, again, Reason number 2, class categorization such as low income, middle income, high income, working poor, working class or middle class or high income. I think that they're lazy. I think that they're misnomers because again, people have way more differences than how much money they make. Sure, everybody makes over 300,000 Rand in that group. It doesn't mean that they have the same day-to-day experiences. Maybe very affluent, but they still have different experiences. Are we accounting for that? So that's what this study tries to get to the root of. And again, this is my brother Ali. We're here in the corner of Steve Biko, Robert Sabuk, which is very important people. It's not lost on me. Again, as a student of the diaspora, the things that Steve Biko went through and Robert Sabuk goes through, or went through, right? So again, I say that, I guess I'm giving away my position. I'm supposed to be objective, but I'm not. I still identify with the marginalized classes. How could I not? I guess the Ph.D. is supposed to make me forget that. I guess I'm supposed to forget where I came from. That's a Kanye West line. I know we don't like Kanye. But I'm sorry. Moving ahead. So get into the methods and the theoretical framework. So here we go. We got two cities. Again, pardon me for my naivete as a junior researcher and aspiring social scientist that is from New York. Pretoria and Johannesburg. To me, as a New Yorker, there's so many commonalities between Joburg and New York, outside of the Dutch influence. I'm not trying to say that Joburg is New York. I'm just saying, relatively speaking, what New York is to America, Joburg could possibly be to South Africa. I could be wrong. I have no problem with that. Pretoria, the city with the second most embassies in the world. The city with the number 1 most embassies in the world, Washington, D.C., where I'm a student. So that was a given for me. Pretoria and Joburg, I love driving up and down. I love all of the populations between these cities. And I wish that I could have interviewed and spoken to everyone that lives here. But unfortunately, I couldn't. But maybe in the future I can. To assess the post-apartheid class structure in urban black populations in Joburg and Pretoria, the study utilized a combination of community-based research methods to review archival information and gather data from participants. This study spans from December 2020, which is my first semester as a graduate researcher and graduate student at Howard University, through April 2026, which is now present day. Between January 21 and April 26, the study included a total of 6 site visits with research sites where data was collected via participant observation and interviews, specifically in Soweto and Sunnyside. Data from observation and interviews was coalesced with themes from archival research findings, as well as policy findings, social media analysis, and geographic information systems and aerial photography to account for the spatial elements of apartheid or underdevelopment. The themes and findings of the data were then situated and assessed using class analysis tools provided by African diaspora scholars, as mentioned. The primary framework for the study is an adaptation of W.E.B. Du Bois' Philadelphia Negro Study, which took place in the late 19th century. I believe it was published in 1899, where Du Bois, one of the first Harvard-educated African Americans, he was able to say that the color line was the greatest problem of the 20th century. What I'm trying to do with this study is say that the color line remains the biggest problem of the 21st century, despite the fact that we have so many privileged, affluent members of the African diaspora, members that again are a minority population that may have what we could consider buku status or be bourgeoisie, right? But the middle class, what does it look like? How big is it? Or is the middle class more so a buffer to keep everybody in check and keep things in play because people think that we're behaving like celebrities and the rich people that we idolize, but we're not, because we still too struggle. We still too have that big, what's the D word? Oh, debt. Yeah, we all have debt. So, in order to see where the color line rests in this society, understanding that the global political economy is fundamentally capitalist, classist, and opposed to racialism, the study uses pro-Africanist class perspectives, which is useful in interpreting the data. These theories or these notions were utilized when interpreting what the findings were. Bantu Steve Biko's concept of black consciousness, Amilcar Cabral's notion of class suicide, which if I would just like to briefly say, class suicide is identifying, we like to say cultural sensitivity. We like to say that we obviously should, understand the differences in humanities and respect differences in humanity, but respect everybody as a human, no matter which population you belong to. So class suicide is the idea that you can commit social suicide by giving up your social status by trying to help another, whether it's because you need a heart transplant, whether it's because you need $1, whether it's because you know that you want your daughter to be educated at the University of Pretoria, so you need to befriend a professor or a current student because maybe you want your daughter to be a student here one day. Whatever it looks like, somebody has to jump out the window to say, hey, I'm not going to follow the unbroken rule of I can't speak to people or identify with people who are not in my class. Frantz Fanon's theories of the importance of culture and the duality of racialism and its impact on indigenous and native populations, Kwame Nkrumah's notion on conscientism, and the latent or intended effects of Christianity, Islam, other religions, as what they have on the African population, and Dr. Walter Riley's concepts about the function of the global political economy and the fundamental role of the state are all used to assess, again, the findings and the things or the notions and ideas that I have investigated. A total of 75 printed copy questionnaires and 10 electric questionnaires were distributed in Soweto and Sunnyside between April and October 25 of last year. 5 locations were used to disseminate the questionnaires. Those locations were universities, shopping centers and restaurants, residential areas, transportation checkpoints and landmarks, as well as tourist attractions. I spent up to 4 hours at each location during each site visit, again, with my brother Ali, soliciting people instead of, again, using a top-down model. There were times where we used incentives, but again, I didn't want people to speak to me because we were trying to give them things. I didn't want people to speak to me because they were trying to influence a Western or pro-Western agenda because I'm an American and I thought that people would want me to know things like it, give positive feedback. I didn't want to be biased in any fashion. So again, I wanted this to be from what we would consider common people. The people, again, as I've been told, there's a lot of people in South Africa who don't go to Sunnyside. That's interesting. It's like that in New York too. Some people in New York don't go to other places in New York. Some people in DC don't go to other places in DC. It's like that, but that's what attracts me. It's not because, again, anybody's a character or caricature of me, or to me. It's not because, again, anybody's a war baby or anybody's, again, when we would say in New York, a hood burger. I don't see that because, again, if we're talking about people who are from the underclass, I'm from the underclass. So what am I scared of? Am I now my clothes because I wear suits? Now I have to only walk with the suits? That's what they tell us. I don't know, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So via random selection, 85 of the 85 distributed questionnaires, data from 7 anonymous participants or responses, or approximately 12.14% of the study's sample population was highlighted in the study's findings, while the remaining data was used to inform the background writing for various sections of my dissertation. I conducted at least 30 off-the-record formal and informal interviews with various stakeholders such as politicians, community organizers, artisans and cultural artists, businessmen and women, nonprofit leaders, youth leaders, students, elders, migrant workers, sex workers, professors, and government employees. So again, I tried to again get a rich perspective of what South Africans think about the current or contemporary society in the post-apartheid era. As mentioned, the dependent variable in this study is class, while the independent variables were occupation, English language proficiency, consistent access to the internet, access to a long-term bank account, ascribed status or how the market views your employability, perceptions of blackness, informal and formal education level. To qualify the variables above, using the qualitative and quantitative methods mentioned, we use surveys, interviews, scales, GIS and aerial photography, as well as archival information to measure respondents' impressions of the social dynamics of South African society, again, specifically in these urban locations. So, this is, again, I would say, the most informative part for me. And it's, I would say, as a passionate person, it's kind of a little bit hard for me to like explain to my contemporaries or to my network how important South Africa is, not because of Amapiano, not because of celebrity, not because of, again, whatever fashion trend is going on, and not because of whatever thing that people want to reduce South Africa to. To me, the history, everything is current events. So as a social studies teacher who works with youth, who's learning from youth and exchanging with youth every day, what I always talk to them about is South Africa and the plight of South Africans, again, no matter where you fall on the quote-unquote class spectrum. Current, future, and past. Freedom fighters, again, members of different backgrounds, despite your ethnicity, again, I believe all people are important. So I have the ultimate amount of reverence for South Africa, and again, me as a student of life and as a student of African studies, I try to get this right in my framing of what would be the historical issues. So again, please forgive me for my naivete, and please inform me and educate me with anything that I did wrong. And as I did this presentation yesterday in Johannesburg, I'm going to kind of change it up in terms of the nomenclature that I use, because I do not mean to be offensive. So if you see any word that you disagree with, just let me know. Holler at me again, I'm going to change it. So here goes the abbreviated of the abbreviation version. Pre-colonial South Africa. Prior to the 16th century, the region of South Africa was dominated by indigenous processes. It is very important to highlight that these indigenous populations who developed social and cultural traditions, as well as political and economic systems, had their processes interrupted by colonialism, capitalism, and eventually apartheid. Right? This is not exclusive to South Africa. However, this is very important because it happened here in South Africa, and I think somewhat of a blueprint was developed for these same things to be applied throughout society. Modern humans have resided at this point of at this part of the world for at least 100,000 years, and their lineage can be traced back to more than 3 million years. Again, this is very, very, very important. As we can see, this is a diagram that was pulled from the History of South Africa by Thompson. And this is, again, one map. I know, again, even maps can be contentious because all maps don't actually have appropriate cartography, or I don't think Robben Island is actually on this map. Robben Island is not on a couple of maps of South Africa. That's very important, especially because what Robben Island was used for, is used for, again, in current and previous society. 3 of the earliest known groups within South Africa are the San people, the Khoi or Khoi people, and the migrating Bantu-speaking populations who were agro-pastoral and moving toward the southern tip. We can see some of what would become the ethnicities or the homeland populations on this map. Moving forward, colonial South Africa. Now, obviously, we see that the map changes. In the mid-1600s, the history of the southernmost country on the African continent experienced change that would impact the nation for centuries. That would be the arrival of European settlers. The Dutch and British held competing interests in the nation during the early colonial period. They still hold competing interests again in contemporary society. After the establishment of the Union of South Africa, again, I just literally glossed over so much history. That is for the sake of this presentation, that is for the sake of time. Again, it's not to omit anything. There are a lot of things that I can mention after this point and before this point. So again, I just want that to be known. After the establishment of the Union, the political development, economic development of the nation began to unfold for various racial groups simultaneously and distinctly. White populations consolidated their power after 2 Anglo-Boer wars, and their economic strategy then focused on maneuvering and exploiting black labor. This, again, I don't need to call black laborers, African laborers, natives. Again, I'm not trying to use words again to be contentious or offensive. This is, again, 1 from literature, 2 again from lived experience. So again, I tried to combine both to be, again, inclusive within the terminologies that I use. Black South Africans who had their interests repeatedly ignored since the arrival of the Dutch in 1652 began to develop political consciousness, forming organizations that would impact the nation throughout the 20th century and beyond. Programs of political organizations highlighted the need for African independence and political and economic development despite the presence of white settlers. Sorry if I messed up. So, because this study focuses on class, I'm highlighting here, during the colonial era, there were early class divisions, not only in South Africa, all over the world. This is just a South African treatment by an American. The mining industry developed due to the relationship among the following 4 groups: employers, white laborers and miners, the Afrikaner community, and native, we can say workers, right? I don't mean to say, again, African laborers here. Again, I'm putting an asterisk by that. We don't have an asterisk by it, but I wanted to put an asterisk by that. The first group primarily consisted of wealthy British descendants who were interested in identifying new ways to acquire cheaper labor. The second group, the white labor force, was attracted to South Africa. Some of them were migrants, many of them were migrants who were interested in the country due to their stories of lore about gold and diamonds or other opportunities within the nation. They took advantage of the ability to organize, form unions, working with the British descendants and the Dutch descendants to be able to maneuver their economic status. The third group, Afrikaner Boers, or mainly farmers, sought to retain wealth brought by the discovery of gold within the land that they sought to claim as their estate. The Boers were concerned with preventing native laborers from equal opportunities, wages, and working conditions. The final group, Native laborers, what I conceive of as black laborers here, received inhumane treatment on the employment market, were prohibited by law from digging and mining to be able to find those precious minerals, paid substantially less than white South Africans, accommodated in prison-like conditions, prevented from leaving mining quarters during their contract terms, and lacked trade union support. During the apartheid, this pre-apartheid racial class division, during the colonial era, some of the apartheid foundations were laid. During this period, extreme segregation and symbols of the pending apartheid began to formulate. The political paths of the white minority collaborators and the non-white populations were bound to intersect or to be interdependent somehow, some way. As the Union of South Africa began to activate its land appropriation plans and strategies, which drew opposition from all populations within South Africa. In 1913, the Union implemented the Natives Land Act, which formally divided the land, and the Immigration Regulation Act, which outlawed Indians from moving from the province in which they were born. The Urban Areas Act of 1923 restricted Natives or Africans' right of movement, and we also had simultaneous political development throughout this process. The African Political Organization was founded in 1902, was open to all races, but was majority composed of colored members of South African society. Later, 10 years later, the African National Congress was developed. And in 1919, the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union was developed. And in 1928, the South African Federation of Non-European Trade Unions was formalized, and the African Mine Workers Union, or the AMWU, was founded in 1941. To me, again, these are not the only organizations that, again, changed the history of the country, but I think that some things are contingent upon the actions of these organizations, and they kind of split or splintered from this, the impetus of these organizations. During the apartheid era, the National Party's 1948 victory led to them quickly advancing to further consolidate power, and a post-war nationalism continued to spread during the African independence movement. Then we have the formal institution of apartheid, which is known as separateness or separate development, depending on who you speak to. 4 different, you could say, policies or 4 different effects of the apartheid policy was implemented. As first, there was a division of the racial groups. We now have African, colored, Indian, and white populations, as each had its own culture. Secondly, whites were considered to be the racially civilized group, and were inherently entitled to absolute control of the state. Third, the policy mandated an emphasis on Afrikaner economic and social control. And fourthly, apartheid authorized social separations via social institutions, as each segment of the population had their services administered by different institutions throughout the country. Very important person. There was a reason that I put Steve Biko here. Still inspires me to this day, many people to this day. Under apartheid, South Africa industrialized and gradually became different from other countries as decolonization and desegregation spread throughout the global South. As the economy expanded and industries admitted more African workers, racial categories continued to define what would be the gaps in underdevelopment. Again, this is important to me because this is the history of the class development in terms of my study. The apartheid period increased the wealth gap between employed Africans and employed whites. The labor practices preventing black South Africans from attaining employment and while holding spaces simultaneously for others in society was detrimental. The apartheid government had exclusive policies within education, here as we're at the University of Pretoria, that ultimately impacted both the primary schooling and the higher education of the country, as different populations were siphoned into different educational spheres, as well as while curriculums were, you could say, distributed to these populations that would influence and inform what they knew, how they would be able to interact amongst society. Again, during a trip to WITS 3 years ago when I presented another study that was not a part of my dissertation, I took this picture in front of the Solomon Malangu House. Again, to me, there's so many different people that are important to South African history, despite any racial status, again, and I really wanted to put them in this presentation, but forgive me for not doing so. This is the era where the crux of modern issues began to formulate as the government emphasized black ethnic differences, provided preferential treatment towards coloreds, Indians or black South Africans, and encouraged internal ethnic fragmentation among Africans. Here's another distinction. Although all of these populations experienced apartheid, of the black Africans, those who were located in the homelands, those who were located in the municipalities or the urban areas, and those who were located in the white farming regions had varied experiences and lived differently. Again, this is a very important distinction. South Africa became an anomaly, as mentioned, as the white minority population was protected by policies during the changing global order that saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of the Soviet Union, and growing movements for independence and anti-colonialism. Such activity would catalyze a period of deliberation and negotiations. This is me alluding to Mandela being free and apartheid formally coming to a close. During this project, you can imagine I heard many things about the ANC. I've heard many things about Mandela. The world over, everybody learns about, they sing Mandela's praises, but to come here again as an American and to hear that everybody is not necessarily happy with the ANC, everybody's not necessarily happy with how Mandela was able to negotiate his freedom, to me I think that's very important. And history is full of anecdotes, and I believe the most important anecdotes are the ones that are accurate. So outside of advocating for any particular group, being accurate in your assessment and your account of history is very important. So I strive to do that. Here goes something that I think is extremely important to note, considering the history of South Africa. There were several class divisions, and there were several developments of political consciousness within the country, and I think that they all operate concurrently and intersect today concurrently in society. The Black South African political assemblies slowly began to organize in South Africa's urban areas as what were once considered tribal groups were gradually restricted from specific areas. The initial African political groups took divergent paths. Which paths am I alluding to? What could be considered, again, in my naivete, my perspective, conservative, liberal, and radical. Considering the British influence on American politics and South African politics, on the global political economy, its institutions, whatever have you. To me, when we speak about politics, again, I think as an African person, I think that just saying that the Labour Party is dedicated to workers, the Liberal Party is dedicated to everybody, the Conservative Party is dedicated to the elite, again, I think that's lazy. Because at times, these people, they oscillate. So Mandela, at one point, he was considered radical. At one point, Mandela was considered very radical. Then somehow he oscillated. Then some people considered Mandela to be liberal. Once Mandela was freed, some people in the ANC who were not within the country, some were in exile, some were participating in training to overthrow the apartheid regime via guerrilla warfare. Some of those people believed that at that point Mandela was conservative. Again, at this point, I think that this is why we can say that these things are a spectrum. These things, again, are not as finite as we believe. Once a radical, always a radical. That's what somebody would say in the PSC, right? Maybe. But then now we have different political parties, right? The Progressive Party led to, again, splintering, and now we have the Democratic Alliance. We now have, again, the Patriot Alliance. We now have Action SA. We have different political parties, which I call, people love to talk about the proliferation of nuclear weapons. I talk about the proliferation of political parties in South Africa. Because to me, again, all of this is a response, no, not to white people, I would say Western society, because the same thing happens in America. So me, again, as somebody who could seamlessly meander and move through class, because again, I was born in the underclass, but here I am being a privileged American in South Africa. What is my class status? What do I identify as? I guess I have to be middle class, but what am I in the middle of? That's what one should ask, instead of thinking, oh, I'm better than other people because I'm in the middle. In the middle of what? I'm maybe in the middle because I'm torn at times between both political and racial poles. So they're going to say they don't like you because you come from a country where Trump is doing this, this, and that. But, oh, do you identify with me because I'm critical of Trump? Do you identify with me because I'm critical of black people? Do you identify with me because I'm critical of rich people? Again, these are all class notions. Or do you identify with me just because I'm a human? That's what we would say if we were talking to the LGBTQIA community, right? Right. So, why do we let these things stop us? These notions of superiority and inferiority. Why do we let these class symbols stop us? That's what this study is getting to the root of. The middle class construct in urban South Africa. I'm going to move a little quickly here because this is just a bunch of numbers. So before I got to my qualitative research, again, I started to pull data from Stats SA. So this, as I mentioned, the study began in fall 2020, and then it continued until spring 2026. So at different points, the data that I used was from reports that were from 2022, 2023, 2024, and I'm going to update this. But this is what I believe is, I think this 6-year period between 2017 and 2022, which is obviously during the COVID era. That to me, again, that has great implications. So again, some differences, as we can see. When people talk about the middle class, we usually love to throw, again, me being an American, we love to throw averages when we're talking about metrics, when we're talking about data. Everybody says the average this, the average that. But when we look at the median, we can see again the median income or the distribution within this chart. It gives you more of an accurate depiction of, again, what is the middle point. Because some would define the middle class in South Africa as the range between those who earn between 4,000 Rand a month all the way up to 25,000 Rand a month, right? Some would say that that's the middle class. Some people would say, again, if you make this number, then this is again, or around this number, then you're again within the range of the middle class. Depending on which data set that you use, this is all important. But again, this gives us the distribution between the top 25, 10, 5%, and the bottom 5, 10, and 25% of monthly earnings by status and employment between these 6 years. This is the meat of the data, so I'm going to focus here, and then again the other ones I'm going to kind of gloss through. So Stats SA published new data on the median salaries in South Africa. Through this data, it revealed huge differences between earnings across the country. And most workers in South Africa earn far less than the average of 25,000 Rand, which is equivalent to 1,400 USD per month. The median salary in South Africa was recorded at 5,417 during the end of the month in 2022. In December 2022, the average salary at the time in Rand was 24,813 Rand a month, December 22 data. While the average represents the equal distribution among all salaried workers, the median represents, by Stats SA, shows again the midpoint of the approximate 13 million workers in South Africa's economy that earn below 5,400 a month, meaning that most of the earnings are concentrated at the top. Again, as we know when we talk about numbers, there's data, there's mid data. Some people may say that this is bad data. Many people can use statistics to argue whatever they want, right? So that again, that should always be highlighted. That's why again, all studies of class are unique. It should not just be, oh, the middle class is this, the middle class is that. We have to use this notion, we have to use that notion. Because this study is focused in the Gauteng province, I looked at the median salary, which is 7,500 per month, the highest in the country among this province, among the 9 provinces. The national median salary is again between this range. It's the national median. So again, some people would say it's between 5,417 and 25,000. Again, it depends. Which, are you looking at the quote-unquote upper levels of the middle class? Are you looking at the mid-levels of the middle class? Or the lower levels, or comprehensively? The average salary in Joburg, again, one of the cities that again is integral economically to the nation and to the world, if we want to go there. 400,000 Rand annually, right? 33,000 per month, according to 2023 reports, which is often skewed by higher earners. And then this can be further broken up as all this data can be aggregated differently by skill level, where we have skilled, semi-skilled, and lower skilled workers. And the key demographics, just focusing, again, not picking on any population, not because we're trying to say that, oh, there's so much inequality. The white population group had the highest median monthly earnings, 21,000 Rand, while Black Africans held the lowest, 4,684. Maybe that's surprising to some, maybe it's not surprising to some. This again is a bunch of other charts, so I'm just gonna kind of just allude to this. I'm not gonna run through this quickly, but this is the median monthly earnings, disaggregated by sex. Then we have something that's also, I think this is uniquely interesting, the median monthly earnings by population group. So we can see the different racial classifications in South Africa versus the different years and the ages of populations. How much do you earn based on how old you are, based on the time period? All of these are important, and again, I think that these things can be looked at, and this is what I would like to expose students to, particularly within this country, so I could try to work with them. I'll probably learn from them. I'm not saying they have to work with me. I just want to, again, do this in the best fashion where it could be applicable to where we could change things internationally. The median monthly earnings of employees by age and sex. Same thing, this is just organized a little bit differently. We can see whether there was an increase or a decrease. What is interesting to note, or not, maybe not as interesting to note, there still is a wage gap between the sexes or between the genders, where men are earning more than women. It's not because we deserve more. Clearly, we don't have babies, right? So we're just making more. I don't know how, I don't know why, but doesn't mean that we deserve more. And women are still grossly underpaid. Not saying that again, a woman's primary value is having a baby. That's not right. I was just median monthly earnings of employee by industry. This can also be broken up. This is very important. As we see in modern or contemporary society, where South Africa, we can say, is plagued by administration issues. Some people say corruption, some people say governmental failure, some people say negligence. Utilities earning or being the highest earning industry is very important. In a place where we have power outages, in a place where we have water shortages, in a place where we have electricity shortages, the fact that employees that work at these utilities companies earning so much money, again, that could be an analysis in and of itself. Then we have the median monthly earnings by employees and occupation skill, broken up a little bit differently, 2017 compared to 2022. And then we have the distribution of the 6-year period of the median monthly earnings of employees based on occupation skill level. Again, I can send this presentation out or talk to anybody about, again, why I use this data, but I want to get to the Q&A part because I think people may have questions. So, as I head towards the conclusion, how race influences class hierarchies in urban South Africa? How do they? This leads me to, my name is Daquan Lawrence, so that's the reason I put Lawrence is diaspora theory. It's not to say, again, that it has to be called that. I don't care. Hopefully I'm just helping. But the diaspora theory of class. My diaspora theory of class. So, well, actually, let me pause here. The findings. What makes one middle class, or what are the thoughts and conceptions of the middle class? I wanted to prepare a nice chart where I have all of my questions with the responses from the respondents, but I failed to do that while finishing the dissertation and getting ready for my travel here, so I apologize for doing that. But what I can say is highlighting the findings from the research. Most of the respondents said things that fell into these primary areas. There were 3, I might be able to show it. I don't want to waste the time. I really want to show you this. There were 3 areas, so there were 3 questions. What is the thoughts of the middle class in South Africa? There have been 6 administrations since the fall of apartheid, with the 7th recently being installed a couple of years ago. What are your thoughts on the economic development for Black South Africans in the 7th administrations that have taken place in office since the fall of apartheid? And the last question is, what systems, social practices, or policies prevent social inclusion in South Africa? From those 3 primary questions, the respondents from my research gave a wealth of information. Most of it pertained to a lack of education policies, the amount of debt that middle class South Africans accrue or receive, the fact that people are still, who can be identified as middle class but are still living pretty much check to check, the fact that there are still remnants, as we could say, from the eras of apartheid and the colonial era that still impacts South African society today. These were all applicable findings, as well as, again, what people could say, which are the normal highlighted responses, which is, again, government failure, corruption within political parties, not just the ANC, I'm going to say political parties, because, again, I think other political parties are complicit. It's not just the ANC. Land rights, redistribution rights, again, economic rights, and I think the last one was, xenophobia. Xenophobia from different population groups. Xenophobia against Africans, xenophobia against members of the LGBTQIA community, xenophobia again between urban and rural members of South African society, and xenophobia based on class status. So those again were the things that I wanted to highlight. Maybe I could produce the graph before I leave, so I can submit that to you all before you leave. But before, like I said, I leave the country, but those were very important. Those findings helped me develop where we will end today. This is a revised treatment of class categorizations that was led by South African researchers, or excuse me, international researchers at the University of Cape Town. So it showed Zizamia and Lembrun in 2017 conducted a study of what the middle class looks like in South Africa, particularly being a developing nation in the global south, or a mid-development country, or mid-income country, people would say, within the global south. So usually when we talk about class, we say there's poor, there's the middle class, and then some people will say there's the rich, super rich, wealthy elite, right? Understood. This is the way we all grew up conceiving it. What I am challenging within this research is that maybe, just maybe, we can revise this. Again, these researchers here have already attempted to revise what will be the class status by introducing a measure of probability, right? So we could conceive of class differences based on the probability that you will fall into one of these categories. If you are in the quote-unquote poor class, some people will say you are poor, you're working poor, or you're like, some people will say super poor, right? Dirt poor, however you review it. They will consider you insecure. This is the word that I would use. I would say that you are economically insufficient relative to the other categories, and maybe if you're at the quote-unquote bottom, although I have it on the top here, there's a reason for that, I can tell you. This is where most people who don't have cars, who aren't, again, formally educated, who may, again, not have 2 or 3 incomes in the household, different people based on their ability to enter and engage in the economy. They can be considered as insecure, economically speaking. They also can be considered transient, because maybe, again, as we said, this is a spectrum. It's probably hardest to get here, obviously, but this is a spectrum. People oscillate and go back and forth. If you are a member of what would be considered the middle class, considering the issues that you encounter on a day-to-day basis,